Welcome everyone, and welcome Osama to this edition. At Krea, over the last few weeks, we've constantly brought people across from different perspectives, disciplines, areas of practice. And definitely while the crisis that we are in the middle of has been a point of inflection, the idea is to have students get some perspectives at all levels. While a lot of the perspectives and information that students do get or within the community itself is at a very top level, whether that's policy, economy, just more broadly around public health and data modeling. There was a fair bit of, I think, interest that this actually came from students saying, we want to talk to people on the ground in terms of what's happening. What are the realities? Because sometimes what looks great or what looks different, what might seem imperative at 30,000 feet up may not be the actual reality on the ground. And that's really where we thought it would be fantastic to connect with you. Firstly, I must thank DEF for immediately coming on board to work with Krea for our social impact internships. It's an initiative we've put together for our undergraduate students at the end of the first year, that they are able to contribute to a community immersion opportunity and make an impact in society. And we're very glad that you offered to some of our students to work on this project. I thought it would be a good idea if you could talk a bit about DEF. I mean, it's fantastic in terms of what we are saying about 23 states in terms of your initiative and the 130 districts that you're actually touching across India. And if you could just provide some hindsight about DEF, its origin, the challenge that you're trying to address. And then the second part of my question would be about what's really happening at COVID. So over to you, Osama.
Hi, everyone. Thank you very much for inviting me. Krea University, its student, faculty, everyone, whoever is there. And I'm sure the recording, when it will be made public, there will be more people to know about things that we are talking about. We didn't know that we will get into a situation where necessarily have to do this through video call, but I wish we would have been doing this more often earlier, and saving lots of travel money would have helped in many more ways. It has been interesting when we started talking with Krea and students and came to realize that, when we talk about digital innovations, digital interventions, there is a lot of talk about misinformation, privacy, Aadhaar, there is a lot of about safety, security, and so on and so forth. All those huge issues of metropolitan, top-down, the issues that we see among the most connected people. But when we talk about digital intervention, when we talk about digital development, when we talk about how digital impacts the larger society, larger masses, I'm sure we all know that 70% of our population live in rural India. We didn't know that 70% contributes such a heavy migrated community to the urban India, which we recently started seeing when COVID happened and all the migrants started going back home. And then that huge population itself became very big and become problematic, that they didn't have money to eat. But what I'm actually trying to say is that since last 18 years, DEF was founded on the very basis that how digital as a technology, digital as a communication, digital as a medium, digital as a culture, digital as a language, digital as an ecosystem benefits the larger masses. Those who are unconnected, those who live in remote areas, those who do not know how to use it, those who could have a better life without leaving their spaces if the digital reached them earlier than later. So this was the main plan of and objective and mission of Digital Empowerment Foundation. And by design, we have been working in rural India more than anywhere else. And our contribution to the nation and nation building is also from the perspective is that how digital actually helps or relate or is a critical part of the community who lives at the last mile. So that's what we are. So whether you talk about telephone, whether you talk about chat, whether you talk about Facebook, whether you talk about social media, whether you talk about technology as Wi-Fi or ISPs or connectivity or access or broadband or web or Wikipedia, anything, we relate how does it benefit to the poor? How does it help them in the matter of education, in the matter of health access, in the matter of livelihood access, in the matter of being educated, in the matter of being job oriented, in the matter of saving the money from the perspective that they should spend less and save more, from the perspective that they should spend less money to get more, and so on and so forth. So over a period of time, we built this network. So we are also an organization who actually work from the philosophy of doing intervention, dirting our hand, working with communities. And we are also, quite critically, active in the areas of policy and advocacy and research and so on and so forth. We actually must be one of those organizations who use their learnings and the work and the models to create a larger phenomena and do the advocacy. For example, you may have National Digital Literacy Mission was created by us, it became a national thing. You must have heard of, 100,000 villages going Wi-Fi was based on our trial of wireless communities for communities, community wireless project. You must have, heard of another program called Tribal Connecting Through Video for Mentorship, which is based on our program. So there are many things that we created. You must have heard of net neutrality issues. So we were very active on those things, to ensure that net neutrality is a part of our framework in this country, and we are not actually going away from net neutrality and its philosophies. So these have actually guided DEF. Coming to a situation where COVID has become a unacceptable part of our life, and it is, I don't know how it is. Can we talk? We were never afraid of virus as much as we are afraid of this physical virus so much. We were not afraid of many more things so much as we are afraid of COVID. It has restricted us. It has made us not to travel. It has secluded us in our houses. It just created a kind of scenario which we are not used to living for the last several decades. We don't know, we are afraid of meeting people, we are afraid of going out, we are afraid of so many things. So it actually changes the whole perspective of our living and lifestyle and all that. And in the middle of all this, when we look at, the people are asking question, how is Digital Empowerment Foundation functioning? And people are saying that, hey, you guys are closed, and when are you going to open? And, since nothing is working. And we found in the last 4 weeks, the most active and busy organization perhaps in the country, because of following 3 reasons. One is because we have a network of 10,000 foot soldiers all across the country. We are spread in 130 districts and 25 states. We have a physical infrastructure which is enabled with broadband and digital assets in 700 locations, all at village, panchayat and taluk level. So this is a huge network, again, in so many districts and all that. So what do you do of this, because even at village level, the restrictions are being locked down, and somebody, when I was talking to one of my village level digital foot soldier, I was asking him how the life is at a village. He said that it's impossible to restrict people in, even if you are in a village, because for us, we can't, our necessity is not only about food. Our necessities are going and sitting outside in the chopal. Our necessities are going out and feeding our cattle and our livestock. Because without whom you can't do your agriculture, you can't do milking of your cow, or you can't sell your milk or whatever. So your life is integrated in rural areas with so many things which happens outside your home. And otherwise you go to earn your wage of the day outside your home, so you are totally restricted. If you need ration, you go out of your home, and that's your minimum requirement, being a poorest of the poor. Even the announcement of the government that they will give 500 rupees per month, 2000 rupees to the farmers, and then another 1000 in some states. So there are different schemes in different states that government is giving. You can't get it without getting out of your house. So in this scenario, imagine the role of our foot soldiers. They have literally, I would say, if I have to talk in the language of our prime minister, they are now COVID warriors kind of thing, without being, doctor, without being health workers. They are warriors because they know how to handle digital, they know how to handle local people, they are networked, they know local administration, they know local panchayat, they know all those things. And that is what they have been doing so far, being a social entrepreneur and digital entrepreneur, is to link the people with all the opportunities of the day. And now they are working, feeding people, hungry people. They have become banking correspondent to deliver money on their doorsteps. They are actually collecting data, going door to door, that how it has affected, and then feeding us back to write a research paper or a survey paper to tell the government that how rural distress has reached to this level, what is the agricultural distress, what is the access to food kind of distress, and things like that. So if you go to our website, you will see we have done in the last couple of weeks a lot of survey, and we have found out several things, like how people are suffering. Even though they have a ration card, they are unable to access it. So you might have heard recently that even in Rajasthan, in many other states, government asked not to use POS machine, the Aadhaar, the machine that actually identifies you through your biometric touch, because touching is dangerous in this kind of COVID scenario. So you can't use it. So government suddenly said that you have to use OTP. Now, when it becomes OTP, that means you are mobile dependent. Do you have a mobile? Many people do not have mobile. Many people have a mobile number given to their ration database. But the point is that being a prepaid subscriber, they keep changing their SIM. So that older number doesn't work today. So how do they get the message? So in this mess, we have another level of bureaucratic mess and technological mess and the connectivity mess that they can't afford at this point of time when they are actually needing food of the day. So these are the problems which may not be highlighted here, because we live here where we are bothered about domestic violence may have increased in the urban cities because the family is living together, and the male female are living together for a long period of time, and those kind of issues. I'm getting into depression because I can't get out. I don't know how to access my education online because my connectivity is not good. So we certainly have a very different kind of stress in urban India or in connected world than the unconnected world, where their life is dependent on connectivity. Their distresses are more basic and more mundane and more essential than what we think ours is. I mean, we may have food, but our problems are maybe much larger, not having other things, but they don't even have access to ration or a food or something. So there are scenarios like this where we feel privileged that Digital Empowerment Foundation conceived very, very timely that how do we actually address rural distress at a village level when we are present. And then immediately we designed this COVID program, which we are calling as COVID Digital Emergency Relief Program. And it actually does four most essential thing, is that how do you make it possible for people to access information, right information, not fake news. Also how to fight fake news and misinformation. The second is how they access their entitlements, which government is giving, so that we don't have to organize for charity or food or something if they can get their entitlements. The third most important thing is that poorest of the poor who do not have access to ration access, they don't have paper, they don't have cards, how do they get food? And the fourth is how do you actually keep on linking the livelihood to the people who are involved at a local level, whose livelihood is totally changed. So for example, I would like to share that many of our entrepreneurs or the digital foot soldiers have become now mask makers. They are stitching masks and they are distributing it, they are selling it. So out of about 600 plus of our centers, about 100 plus centers are making masks. They are taking orders from local hospitals, local pharmacies, local, medicine shop, and even those people, because now government has made it mandatory to have masks all the time on your face. So, now the market of mask making and mask apps, the utilization has increased, and I'm sure quite to the tune of sanitary napkin usage, it will also become a part and parcel of our daily life. We will have to use it. So this is also an interesting part, is that how our digital foot soldiers suddenly became a real foot soldiers, suddenly became entrepreneur of a different kind, suddenly became social worker of a different kind, suddenly became a provider rather than a problem themselves, suddenly became fundraiser locally, because DF itself cannot provide all the fund, even if people are hungry, because our projects are based on our fundings are based on projects. So you cannot just give money for distribution of food unless my funder allows me to do that. So we are actually working on how do we actually affect the lives of at least 300 to 600 families in rural India, in these 130 districts, to be one that their life is as least affected as possible. They get maximum access to whatever necessary for them to do, and sail them through next 3 to 6 months in such a way that when we start our normal life of operation, they still survive to take, to take life in their own hands, to try and sail through the rest of their life. So that's what we are working, very much relevant digitally, very much relevant socially, very much relevant entrepreneurially, very much relevant, in terms of bringing the local knowledge and the grassroots knowledge to the policymakers in terms of how they can use these information to actually, create an impact and create policy. So I will just end by saying that we are actually trying to create a situation of gathering information from all the 130 locations and through 5,000 to 10,000 foot soldiers to feed data from the ground, so that we know how COVID has affected the masses on total life cycle, economically, socially, medically, health-wise, and all those things, so that here we can make a plan, we can think of what could be the new opportunities, what are the new challenges, what are the new plans that we can conceive of, and accordingly, government can come up with the new solutions. So I'll end with that one,
Sure.
but please let me know what is your curiosity,
Sure.
what would you like to know? Is there
Yeah,
anything that...
perfect. So we've got a couple of questions, of course. So before I kind of, go further into the questions, but I wanted to touch on the last bit that you spoke about, which is you had the way your info centers, what they did pre-COVID, and then suddenly they're armed with doing some things for now. How do you see some of these info centers change in terms of any insights that you think has changed now from here? Because no doubt what's happened here is it's affected all our lives in the way that we're looking at the future of our work, the future of our practice. So for DEF specifically and these info centers, what kind of early insights have you got that you thought this is not something our info centers actually did before, but it's something that we will do from here on? Anything that is interesting enough that would be useful?
So one thing, to reply to your question, but before that, just to give you a background, that all our foot soldiers are not paid employees of DEF. They all are potentially and structurally entrepreneurs. So they are supposed to use the digital assets and digital connectivity and their social network them into is earn money through by offering knowledge services and the time as a service. One is always is entrepreneurship. So that became very handy in this kind of situation. And that we must note that had we created a situation of an organization like ours, where they all were paid, and all the grants going into paying and sustaining these people would not have lived through their life to see this day, because you were so much dependent on salaries. But the good thing is that we created entrepreneurship model around this one. So that's number one. Number two, they always had been taught and used to risk taking. So that becomes very, very, very handy. The third thing is that in this situation, which we never tried earlier, is that when there is a disaster, then your entrepreneurship is tested. And it was tested quite well. I mean, I'm not saying all the 700 or 5,000 are performing to the same level, but we can easily see that how they are using this as an opportunity to come to that level of providing, become a provider rather than become a consumer yourself. So I would say that, a provider is a producer is an entrepreneur, and, and a giver. But a consumer is always a person who takes and who wants or who expects that somebody else will do something for you. So what is beautiful about this one is that, they came forward to use all their skills and assets in such a way that they just change their approach and become a provider, and become and take the responsibility of a provider, and start acting it. And in this case, they use their digital power much more intelligently. For example, our guys who were operating from a center suddenly, wrote few letters to the local district collector, please allow me to have an e-pass, please give me a volunteer so that I can move around. And then they started moving around on a bike, going from one place to other, and giving money, delivering at the doorstep, because the bank is far away. Similarly, your stitching machine was lying somewhere, or it was not available. You suddenly, fetched it from your neighbor or somebody and started stitching masks, and started complaining to us that we are not getting raw material. Can you please organize for raw material? So your complaints are different than the complaining that please take care of us. So yeah, it was quite interesting.
That is interesting. Let's talk about, there's two things, right? One is, of late, I've heard a lot of people in the humanities space always talking about this whole Maslow's theory, how internet and the Wi-Fi has somehow taken stack into that. We quite understand your roti, kapda, makan, and internet survey, which is also interesting. So somehow we've constantly been hearing this in the urban, well-connected spaces about roti, kapda, makan, and internet superseding all of that. Clearly, roti, kapda, and makan has a certain divide in communities, and we cannot, of course, ignore the digital divide question. Just wanted your thoughts on the whole, especially around this time where everything that we do, including the education that we're trying to do now, is based on some of these, digital connectivity and mediums. Where do you think we stand in terms of the level of importance that internet has been given in this hierarchy of basic needs, and how much does it actually matter to some of these communities on the ground?
So I wrote a piece a few days back on our website, in our blog, that, having a mobile connectivity or a call time is a lifeline for me as a migrant laborer who didn't have money to pay for the talk time. And being a prepaid subscriber, he lost his, he exhausted all the talk time, and then suddenly is stranded somewhere in the middle of jungle while he was traveling back from Delhi to Bundelkhand. So we realize that there are significant number of people who use feature phone, and they are fully dependent on connectivity and talk time, because they have to link back to somebody, they are dependent on their business so that people call them back, and so on and so forth. But even in this case, they were not actually waiting for anybody to feed them. They wanted their battery to operate, they wanted their mobile to operate, they wanted their talk time to be available. Why? Because they wanted to continue to be in touch with their families so that they can tell them where they are, or they can call somebody who can help them. but without connectivity, you can't do that. That is one level. The second level, what COVID, in a situation of COVID, what I am realizing is that the value of connectivity and digital is not in its globalization, right? Its value in localization. So I would say that how much connectivity or digital allows me to be locally connected in a given geographical area within my linguistic peer group, or my geographical peer group, or my district peer group, or a panchayat peer group, which allows me to do efficiently some of the communication that I need to do, because suddenly you must be seeing that COVID is actually making us think that, is globalization worth it? Because I mean, why can't we live it with local dependence, with local economy, with local infrastructure, with local supply chain? Why do we have to go so much so that we find each solution in the different corner of the country or the world? Because it's not sustainable. It requires so much of traveling and supply chain and displacement. Everything requires energy, everything requires investment, everything requires expenses, and so on and so forth. But if I have to give something from my home to the other home, it can be done either through barter system or by calculation of need rather than desire. So what I am feeling, and also somebody was saying that, hey, gig economy is doomed now, because e-commerce is not going to happen. All these Olas of the world and the Ubers of the world and the Zomatos of the world and the Swiggis of the world is gone. But the point is, all the gig economy is based on physical economy, on physical displacement, physical infrastructure, physical need. And but the point is that if physical doesn't exist, then how do you think that the online will exist? So we need to see online and digital from the perspective of our real life scenario, brick and mortar scenario. You cannot think online from the perspective totally away from the physical world. And your physical world has again have to be calculated from the perspective of your geographical necessities and the geographical existence, and then see how many of the parameters are supposed to be dependent globally or nationally or outside your geographies, and how much can be a part of the local ecosystem. And then you need to see how mobile or connectivity or digital provides me efficiency to do that. And I mean, e-commerce may happen, but I would say, why not e-commerce can happen only in South Delhi, within or maybe you are at the border of Tamil Nadu in AP, maybe the district where you are, can your district, in any case, your district size is as good as any European country, so why can't you have a local economy? And then you can have a supply chain from there. You procure locally, you distribute locally, you don't do outside. I mean, you do outside, but that's a separate, framework or a different kind of product, but not everything, even the smallest food items we are getting from US, or for that matter, somewhere else, although the nature has designed the ecosystem in such a way that everything that you grow around you is good for you as a health perspective also, because of the moisture, because of the weather, because of the water, because of the everything. Why can't you consume what you grow around them? But long answer, what I'm saying is that maybe we need to look at digital, local, and contextualizing digital in a local scenario rather than as a global scenario.
Thank you. That's quite an interesting conundrum. Actually, it's quite interesting. You touched on the local, and I'm going to take our first question on the chat, while I do have a couple of pre-sent questions. And Sam actually asks about how important is it to have local leaders for such initiatives? In the sense, how does that convert to can this still be done? How does that impact on the sustainability of some of these initiatives if there were people from external? And how much do local leaders themselves leading initiatives make an impact?
I mean, in any case, I think local leadership is very important. First of all, leadership is important, So we also need to look at from the perspective of educational perspective, how much do we really teach leadership, and how much of leadership teaching that we do, which actually it helps leader to create more leaders, because most of the time we create leaders who do not want to create more leaders, you know. Although the basic definition of leadership is that you create more the best leader creates more leaders. So for number one is that leadership is required. The second is that yes, leadership is required at a local level, in a local linguistic framework, local geographical framework, local economic framework, and local political framework also. Like you mentioned panchayat, you know, you mentioned, can we go to the district? And incidentally, India is very well structured. You know, we have a village level structure, we have a panchayat level structure, we have a block level or a taluk level structure, we have a district level structure, and then a state, and then the country, you know. So we need to really look at how do we create leadership, and leadership not from political perspective, leadership from the community perspective, and from the solution perspective, from the economic perspective, from critical thinking perspective, that we create as in a local area, in a level. And that's actually how, I mean, we originally didn't design it like that, but that's the way we work, is that all our digital foot soldiers, whom we call either Suchnapreneur, or we call it CIRC coordinators, or we call them, you know, digital coordinators, or we call them entrepreneurs, or we call them village level entrepreneurs. They all are actually, you know, chosen or selected on the basis of their leadership quality and the quality of taking risk, or the quality of entrepreneurship, which has very less to do with digital skilling or any skilling for that matter. The basic skill is that how much do we connect to the local people who are ready to listen to you. And if you really look at one of the biggest epidemic of our community and society today, which is misinformation, these kind of leadership are going to play a huge role.
It's interesting you touched on that, because one of the questions we got was from Devi, and she really touches on this misinformation bit. So she says, is it really important to hassle the poor with so much? Why do they need to be connected? I mean, you've of course touched on a lot of benefits, but from a student question is, do they really need access to all the information that they don't actually need? And does that put them in more distress in knowing more? And hence, how do you control this misinformation? You did talk about some of your soldiers actually handling fake news. So anything that you think that DF specifically does quite well in terms of, you know, this, as well as this information explosion, and what is its impact on some of these communities that you work with?
So I would certainly like, you know, the person who is asking this question to try out herself to go to a village and live for 6 months without being connected, and see, you know, whether she or he is a better person than what she. But coming to the, you know, information is a necessity. You know, information is a necessity. There is no doubt about it. Just because information becomes lethal, we cannot say that information is not required. Or why do you bother somebody with the information? We always need to, you know, and that can happen at a family level also. I mean, one person gives not so good information, one person gives good information, one person gives correct information, other person gossips a lot. This is part of our ecosystem. Information is food. You cannot live without information, for sure. Number one. Number two, you have to create a cadre system, or a kind of system that actually helps in creating a society which identifies its own leader to believe in it, and see how do you think. So which means critical thinking. So we need to really acquire critical thinking ingredients in our society. You know, so I always say that in the current era and the coming future, basic literacy is not the basic requirement. The new requirement is critical thinking, because now everybody is literate, because the medium is medium is oral now. So oral may everybody speaks, everybody listens, you know, even my language gets translated if I don't know, you know, so hardly there is any barrier of a script or a medium or a language or something. So in this kind of scenario, when everybody is literate, as basic literate and digitally literate, what do you do? I mean, we have now more misinformation than earlier, you know. because there is more virality, But the point is, the answer is not that we devoid people from being connected or snatch away the access to information. But the point is that how do we inculcate critical thinking? And the new tools are that I should know what is misinformation. I would know what is fake news before I start spreading. India is in a critical junction because India has lived without being connected and without using these tools for a long time. And we have a very different kind of habits, we forward information without thinking that how it will harm somebody. Not that if I knew it will harm, I may not forward it. But the point is that there is a barrier between the knowledge now and the knowledge in future. So critical thinking, I would say, must be part of every curriculum that we have, every discussion we have. It's the most critical requirement of human existence now, is how to have a critical thinking in a hyper connected world, because we are certainly going to be hyper connected, more hyper connected than even now. We are going to face this flow of information. There is no going back on this. The only thing what we need to figure it out is that, are we developing critical thinking at a mass level?
Absolutely. And, I'm glad you touched on that, because critical thinking as a competency is one of the guiding principles based on the Krea curriculum. And it lies at the core foundation blocks of, how we actually build the interwoven learning. And again, immersive opportunities like this are one of the areas in which students can continually build this competency as well. The next question comes from Pranesh, one of our students. And Pranesh asks, do you see any permanent changes that this crisis is going to create?
I certainly see a huge fundamental systemic change in our lifestyle. And I still don't know how, but I was talking to some other webinar in the morning, and I touched that we may not be seeing education as we know today. We may not be looking at qualification and degrees and skilling the way we look at it today. We may not be looking at association with universities the way we look at today. All these might change. The whole education paraphernalia may change. We may go for more, very self-critical oriented identification of what do I need to be, rather than what the market requires. Because tomorrow there might be no market, per se, the way we knew it. It will be all new scenario. Travel, tourism is a big market. What would be there tomorrow? I mean, for Airbnbs of the world, or for that matter, all the travel agencies and the hotels, what will happen? For the next couple of years, nobody is going to travel as much as they were used to. No, so what will happen to them? So, the whole job market. So you cannot look at future from job market perspective, education and qualification perspective, and degree perspective, and all those things might change altogether. Maybe the economy structure itself may change. Health sector might be such a big thing that health sector may get divided into many things. You never know. Education also may get bifurcated into so many things that now I need to be educated from the perspective of what I want to know, what I want to be, what I want, my value system. And I might choose, Kala as my mentor, which is individual, but I will acquire all my skills individually by connecting different people. And all this will be in the cloud. I will choose every different thing that I want to know, and then I will choose everything to learn from wherever it is best available. And you may never go to a walled school, or all the school in a campus. You may learn on your own. You never know. And nobody may ask you what's your qualification. They may just ask you, what do you do? And there may not be a scenario of real classification of job availability. There may not be campus interviews anymore. I don't know. But the point is, I feel that things will change fundamentally in many ways. And I will be surprised if it does not.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the whole, what you're talking about, the degrees, has by and large changed. We're beginning to see even large corporations like Ernst & Young saying, we don't really care what you're looking at in degrees. We want to look at competencies. We want to look at skills. We want to look at attitudes and some of this. The next question comes from Aditya. Slightly, I think it touches a bit around the health and change of habits in a way. Are we going to see a change with COVID, with more dependence on raw materials and us kind of creating this than maybe processed food and pre-cooked food delivery? This is just your thoughts on that whole industry in the sense. Do you see that impacting?
Yes, I feel so also because I have a very strong background in believing in the system of organic food and localized food and handmade food and avoiding process oriented food. So if you really look at food, on one side food is a necessity, but on the other side, if you look at the business of food, the entire business comes from beyond necessity, beyond need. It comes from luxury, gourmet, processing and all those things. So basic food that you need for yourself for living may not require transportation at all, packaging at all, or delivery at all, or pre-cooked at all, And not that we didn't deliver food earlier in our life. I mean, in various festivals, we used to deliver food in neighbors so that they can taste mine and I can taste theirs. That used to happen. But just to the specific question that you are asking, I feel that there is a whole lot of change in that one. And actually, you are right in that particular area of food and processed food and cooking and delivery and restaurants and all those things. There is going to be a huge change because you see today itself, we all are cooking in our houses. There's no maid coming, there's no help coming. We are changing our hands every day in the kitchen. Mothers are cooking, daughters are cooking, husbands are cooking, and sons are cooking. Everybody is actually cooking. Suddenly it's nobody. It's not one person's business or not one person tasks. And even in the supply, you are getting the most things that is available very, very much locally. If you go to rural India, absolutely locally. There is hardly any supply chain coming from totally out. I am foreseeing that food industry will be heavily affected, whether negative or positive. If you look at it from pollution perspective and the expense perspective, you can say positive also. But in terms of earning and livelihood for the job perspective, it's a negative.
Yeah, thank you. The next question comes from Sanjana. So Sanjana is really talking about, yes, the world has changed from what it was and the power of the digital platform. So her question is more on, can this digital platform provide job opportunities? In that sense, this whole question of access and equality, what happens to those who cannot access some of these opportunities? And yeah.
Sanjana, what I feel is that, again, you are still looking at job as an opportunity of livelihood. I don't even know if the job framework will exist in the future. But if you're talking about provisioning of skill that requires to do online work, which can be paid for, I would say yes. The freelancing, the offline, the online working, the distant working will go more and more online, but mostly of those products which are knowledge products, information products, wisdom products. When I'm talking about freelancing, reading, writing, researching, information, packaging, designing, many things of such things. And again, I'm not talking about it from job perspective, but these work will go more and more online. But the point is that who will give this kind of job? If I don't have a basic requirement of advertising, who will do the design? If I don't have a newspaper existing or an online magazine existing, who will write? And for whom will you pay? So it's all interrelated. But what I see is that in the form of digital cloud computing, cloud-based reservoir, online working, online knowledge exchange of online is going to increase a lot.
Thank you. We'll see if that's coming through, but we do have 10 minutes before we wind up. And I really was interested, Sama, in terms of, given there's a few youngsters here, and of course, this is going to be recorded and shared with a much larger audience. What would be your kind of message for some of these students who are sitting in this very unique space about what's prescriptive? Some things are intuitive, but if there is a way that they would look at two things: one is, of course, build their own competencies and skills, and secondly, be of relevance to society and community. And if there's something that you think what they could be looking at doing, whether that's in context of DEF or otherwise, ways in which that they can contribute from here on in terms of this digital explosion and connecting it to where people actually need it.
So I would say that this is a very good time for you to introspect, for you to do a lot of self-researching, for you to really look at society at large. You look at historical evolution of human beings, settlements, geography, history, linguistic localization, and all those things. It's very, very important to look at them. But going forward, what is the biggest change that has taken place in the last 5 decades than the humanity they used to live earlier and now? One of the biggest thing is that globalization. We, in the last 5 decades, the humanity has progressed to the level where we all started thinking that everybody is connected, everybody is replaceable and displaceable, everybody has access to anywhere in the world, and there is no barrier to that. That's broadly what, so supply chain becomes, trading becomes, business becomes, displacement becomes, travel becomes the basic, baseline of our existence and thought process. Now you suddenly think that what if you are suddenly asked to restrict yourself, you are then go back to the old era of community-based living, geographically restricted area to live, less to travel, less to trade, less to exchange, then what kind of life would be, and therefore what would be relevant. What will not change? We will still need oxygen, we will need water, we will need food, we will need to survive, we will need to thrive also, and we will need to socialize, we will need to exchange goods also among ourselves. We will continue to research and explore more and more. That human desire will not going to vanish. In those kind of scenario, how do you see yourself as an innovator to see that where will be your role to play in many ways? There are many human skills. Those are natural. What are those? Maybe you can listen to the lecture of Ken Robinson, who is a great, basically he is an uneducation guy. So he doesn't believe in a regular, what you call as, frame based schooling or school as a factory. He sees the school as a factory. But maybe you can look at him. What are the things that we see as cognitive, as natural, as basic human tendencies and human nature, and then drive from there. What are the things that would be relevant? Yeah, and then accordingly put yourself into that bracket. Certainly you will have to unlearn lots of things to think like that than to straightforward. You'll have to unlearn from outside the boundaries of campuses, outside the boundaries of qualification and education, courses, timelines, grading, and so on and so forth.
Absolutely. You're touching a lot of things that, so integral to part of Krea. Learning to learn is one of our building blocks to critical think. To be comfortable with some of unanswered questions is something that we, encourage our students to look at. Here's next question. I think this is around, before I get to Gaurav's question, from Krishna Kumar. Do you see increased formal institution, which is government or private involvement of push, required to support social entrepreneurship in the current context? Do we need a more institutional push for social entrepreneurship? Has it changed in the current context, do you think, or has it always been important?
Social entrepreneurship is a very natural phenomena. Like entrepreneurship is a very natural phenomena. I always say that entrepreneurs are born. You only nurture them to give them finishing touch, you know. But risk-taking ability cannot be, intruded into the life habits. So similarly, social entrepreneurship is very much natural to the person. You roam around and you'll find social entrepreneurs every corner of the house, or the villages, because people want to help people. People want to identify problems and solve them. So, but it's interesting that you are asking this question. Is the considering this disaster, considering these kind of situation, and considering that India is a country where there is a regular disastrous situation because of various reasons, we might as well look at how we institutionalize social entrepreneurship. It's a good idea actually, to think about how social entrepreneurship can be institutionalized at a micro level, nano level, medium level, small level, like MSME, social entrepreneurship, or nano entrepreneurship. And so they exist, by the way. You look at all the cluster-based businesses, handloom businesses, handicraft businesses, they are full of social entrepreneurs. Our country actually lives on social entrepreneurs, because more than 50% of the services that they give you, they do not charge for it, actually speaking.
Fair enough. This again, we're kind of touching on the digital divide slightly, but this is something that Harinandan had sent in earlier, and we got a question here as well, which is about, just the huge importance around digital education, information, and we're talking again about the divide. And will this whole importance about imparting education on the digital platform be hampering the way education itself is actually delivered to some classes who can't afford it? So we're coming back to the digital divide, but just maybe at this point you can talk a bit about how do we bridge this a little better. That is going to happen is imperative.
Online education, offline education, or education is not developed globally in the last 5 decades as a matter of requirement of creating good human beings, to be very frank. It is built around creating jobs and skills to suit to the requirement of factories and the industries and the organization who need such kind of skill. So if you really look at entire education sector, it is designed in such a way that whether they can fit into the block of this, traveling, go here, researching, go here, all this is required by some outfits. So our education system so far has been designed like that. Now you have to think that education has to reconstruct itself or unconstruct itself. That if you have to educate yourself, then it's not education, it is a skilling. It is learning to do something that is required by somebody else. Education is something different. Education is more paramount to the human development, I would say. As how you become moralistic, how you become responsible, how you become accountable, how you become, in principles, how you become right-based, and so on and so forth. So education is something different. Maybe the time has come where we are going to have this much more easily done because of online than the previous structure that we had created. So my reply to that question is more from the perspective that first we'll have to deconstruct and unconstruct education itself, and then we have to see how online platform or these linking or a connectivity based provisioning of education or education ingredients are going to be easy for individual or decentralized way of learning.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think all those things touched upon: ethical, resilient, adaptable, caring, also being significant parts of what we build. This comes from Gaurav, and it's the whole blockchain disruption. So everything that we're talking about, AI, or whether that's big data, the Internet of Things, and whatever that's disrupting, are we actually putting much of this technology to the most needy of the world? Is it really going to the rightful use to people who deserve it? Are we doing enough? Are they being leveraged enough?
So Gaurav, technology was always there as a part of our existence. It just kept on, increasingly to take over our life. So now we are in a situation where digital as a technology is taking over our life. But whether you call it big data or AI or ML or IoT, what we are actually seeing is that dataization of humans and the challenge of humanization of data, you know. So if you are going to use humans as a source of data, then you need to work on how do you humanize those data to not allow it to be used in the hands of the evils. You know, I would say the same information is good for me, but the same information with a different attitude becomes misinformation. You know, same social media platform was extremely good when it came into our hands, but suddenly it became the most evil thing when we came to know that the same social media platform was used by American elections by somebody to motivate the people into a different direction to vote a different kind of people. So of course, big data allows it, AI allows it, machine learning allows it. You know, all this is going to be into the decision-making power, that how data is going to give more and more power in the hands of the decision maker to how it can be utilized. So far, most of the technology has been used to benefit some at the top. So I doubt that why this technology as digital or big data will not be utilized to create more divide between the poor and the rich. It might, but also the large scale availability of big data in the hands of the general masses may reverse it also, you know, for about open data, for about open technology. I mean, gives much more hope that there is a possibility that we might be able to work more from the needy perspective, might create more equal society. So far, the result is not showing that we are having lesser and lesser divide. No, we are having more and more divide actually. Post-COVID, I don't know, it looks like that suddenly COVID is actually is another form of demonetization. It's a very natural demonetization, you know. It's affecting the poorest of the poor more than anybody else. You know, they are becoming more and more poor, and without blaming the government also, because it's a natural epidemic. You know, so I would say there is a possibility that we may become much more divided society and community. Yes, technology can help, but how do you use the technology? Now even access to technology is becoming very, very partially driven. You know, if you don't have a democracy, you also have no access to technology. You know, it is in the hands of very few people.
Absolutely fair. Thank you very much. I think we've come to the end of the 1 hour. So thank you so much, Osama. I think that was absolutely precious to hear from you, right? You know, in terms of what's happening and your thoughts about having touched some of these people. And we do, you know, at Krea very strongly believe that these are some opportunities that our students should immerse themselves into, be aware of, as well as contribute as they go along. And everything that you talked about, whether that's being ethical, that's being realistic, being very comfortable with uncomfortable situations, are all parts of what we try to address as well. So I do look forward on behalf of Krea to keep continuing the dialogue with DEF, and we do hope that this summer we'll have some opportunities to work with you, as well as for continuing opportunities between the both institutions. Thanks once again on behalf of everybody that's here and behalf of the Krea community for spending your 1 hour, which is most precious, I understand, during this time that you would rather be out there, you know, contributing a lot more, but your words have inspired so many more soldiers, if I would like to say, of today. Thank you so much.
But just before going, I would like to say to all of you, go to DF website and see what all we are doing. See how you can contribute from knowledge perspective, from networking, also spread the word, because we are also looking, we are a not-for-profit organization. Maybe your connectivity and linkages can help us, mobilize more resources. So don't hesitate to, offer your help or connect us to those who can help. So thank you very much for listening to me. We will have more sessions like this, and Kala and Gaurav and everybody else, thank you for inviting. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.